Hi, this is Grandma Lorie's Bible Stories, and today, Moses, from Prince to Prophet. Before we learn about Moses, think back on Joseph and the coat of many colors. Remember how he went from slave to prime minister of Egypt? Remember how he saved his whole family from starving? After that, the huge family of Israel stayed and lived in Egypt, and they had lots and lots more children. You must also know that Israelites were also called Hebrews, because that was a famous ancestor's name. Remember that. Israelites and Hebrews are the same people. Now, back to Moses. 400 years after Joseph, the new Pharaoh thought there were way too many Israelites in his land. He worried that they might gang up and try to fight against Egypt. So he forced the Israelites to be slaves. They had to do exactly what the Egyptians ordered them to do. Slave drivers and guards would whip them if they didn't obey or didn't work very hard every minute. The Egyptians forced them to build great buildings and fancy tombs, plus entire new cities. Other Israelites had to work hard on farms to feed the Egyptians. But the more the Israelites were whipped and worked, the more children they seemed to have. So Pharaoh called in all the Hebrew midwives. A midwife was, and still is, a lady who helps babies get born at home. They didn't have doctors or hospitals for that. The Pharaoh told the midwives, "When you are helping Hebrew women have babies, if you see the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, let her live." The midwives thought this was terrible. Plus, it was against God's laws, so they did not do what the Pharaoh commanded them to do. They let the boys live. Soon Pharaoh called in the midwives again and asked, "Why do you let the baby boys live?" The midwives answered, "Hebrew women are not like soft Egyptian women. They are strong and give birth very fast, even before we can get to their houses." So the Hebrews kept having more and more children, both boys and girls. So the Pharaoh gave a new commandment to all his people. "Every time you see a Hebrew baby boy, you must grab it and throw it into the Nile River. But let every girl baby live. Girls make easier slaves than boys do." Now it happened that this Pharaoh had a daughter named Bithiah, whose husband had died. Bithiah had desperately wanted a baby to love and take care of, but she no longer had a husband. Every day, Bithiah went down to the Nile River to swim and to bathe. It was very hot in Egypt, and the water was so cool. She had female attendants and guards who obeyed all her orders and kept the crocodiles away. A short distance up the river, there was a Hebrew man named Amram with a wife named Jochebed. They already had a little boy named Aaron and a little girl named Miriam. But Jochebed soon had another baby, and it was a boy. She didn't dare take it out of the house at any time in case an Egyptian might grab it and throw it in the river to die. So she kept the baby boy at home all the time for 3 months. One day, Jochebed told her family, "I've had a revelation from God that will save our son. The Lord told me to make a basket out of reeds, coat it with tar inside and out, wrap our darling baby boy in a blanket, and put him into this tiny boat. I will make a lid to cover the boat. I must put it in the Nile River and let him float downstream toward the palace." Little Miriam was frightened. "But Mother, what if a crocodile comes around?" Jochebed replied, "That's where you can help, Miriam. You must walk along the riverbank, not far from our baby's little boat. If you see any dangers, pull the boat out, and we will try again the next day. But if the Lord told me to do this, I'm sure he will keep our baby safe." So the baby was put in the tiny boat and placed in the water near the edge of the river, with Miriam walking beside the riverbank, hidden in the bulrushes. He was an absolutely beautiful baby with pink cheeks, red lips, and perfect soft skin. The baby didn't like being alone in the basket, so he started to cry. Just at that time, Princess Bithyia came out to bathe. She had been wishing for the 100th time that she had a baby of her own. When she heard a baby cry from the direction of the water, she waded out and saw the little basket boat. "Oh, oh," she cried, "there must be a baby in that little boat." She pointed to it and said, "Mara, wade out and catch that boat. Bring it back to me." Her servant did as she was told. Princess Bithyia lifted the lid and looked inside. "It is a baby, the most beautiful, darling baby I ever saw. And I've been praying for a baby. Perhaps the goddess Isis has heard my prayers and brought me this baby to be my own." She lifted the baby out and hugged him with love. Then she noticed the baby blanket. It looked just like the cloth their Hebrew slaves wove. "I wonder," said the princess, "if this could be a Hebrew boy, escaping my crazy father's terrible command." She peeked into the baby's diaper. It was a boy. "Oh, I'm so glad Isis saved his life and answered my prayers for a baby at the same time." She rocked the baby, who began to coo charmingly. But very soon the baby began to cry. "Oh no!" cried Bithyia. "What's the matter with him? Why is he crying? I just want to love him." Well, hiding in the bulrushes nearby was the little girl named Miriam. When she heard the princess, she stepped right out and bowed. Then she said, "Your Highness, I think the baby is hungry." "Hungry? Oh, what shall I do?" Miriam said, "Your Highness, I know a Hebrew lady who has plenty of milk, but no baby to feed it to. Shall I go get her for you? She isn't very far away, and she's nice." Yes, go get her right away. I don't want my darling little son to be hungry. Hurry." While Miriam ran to get her mother, Princess Bithyia let the baby suck on her finger, which calmed him down. Bithyia said, "I know what I will name you, my darling little son. You shall be called Moses, because that name means I drew him out of the water." When Jochebed arrived, the princess could hardly bear to give up her new little son. She said to Jochebed, "You must nurse him right away now, and every day and night give him as much as he wants to drink, and I will pay you for doing it." Jochebed tenderly took her own little son, but did not tell the princess he was her own. She said in her mind, "Darling baby, you will grow up in a palace and be loved instead of killed. You will be a prince instead of a slave, and I will get to love you and tend you until the princess sends me away. Oh, how I thank the great God for his wonderful blessings." So Moses grew up in the palace. There may have been rumors that he was born a Hebrew, but nobody dared to say that aloud because the princes could have their heads chopped off. Besides, he was super smart and super strong and good at everything a prince should be good at. So the Egyptian people loved him. They thought he was a great prince. The Pharaoh treated Moses like his own real grandson. He had no idea Moses was a Hebrew. Instead, he said, "Moses, my grandson, is there anything you can't do? You are the best in battle, and you have races that you always win, on foot and on horseback. You have great ideas to design my new city. I'm so proud of you." Sometime along the way, as Moses was growing up, Jochebed told him, "Dear Moses, the goddess Isis did not give you to Princess Bithiah. I am secretly your real mother, but you must never tell anyone. I am telling you the truth now, so you will be extra kind to the Hebrew slaves because they are your real relatives." Moses was pretty shocked, but he was super curious too. He knew how to keep a secret. For the first time, he began to really look at the Hebrew slaves. Now that he knew they were his relatives, he was angry at the way the slave masters were cruelly whipping and beating them. Sometimes he would stop them saying, "Hey, take it easy on that Hebrew. He can't work hard if you beat him so much." Moses had never really looked at slavery before, and he did not like what he saw. The slaves were men and women like he was, with feelings and lives to live. Why should they be whipped or starved to do work for the rich people of Egypt? It was not fair, and he felt bad about it. One day, Moses saw an Egyptian beating an old crippled Hebrew almost to death for not being strong enough to obey an order. It was stupid and cruel. Looking around and seeing no one, Moses attacked and killed the cruel Egyptian and buried his body deep in the sand. The next day, when he went out to watch the Hebrews work, he saw two of the slaves get into a fierce fight, socking and strangling each other. He stopped their fight and asked, "Why are you beating each other? With all the whipmasters around, don't you have enough pain?" One of the men sneered at Moses and said, "Who made you the ruler and judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" Moses froze. "What are you talking about?" he asked fearfully. "Oh, you thought nobody was watching, but I saw you through a window when you couldn't see me. I told everyone I knew what the great prince of Egypt had done." What could Moses do? Nothing. He gave the man an evil look and went back to the palace. But word had gotten to Pharaoh already. Pharaoh was furious and yelled, "How dare you, a filthy Hebrew, and pretend to be my grandson? For this you shall die. Guards, guards! Grab Moses and bring him to the throne room immediately. I will kill him there in front of all my officials." But Moses had not won all those foot races for nothing, and he had not lived in the palace all his life without knowing every hallway, window, and stairway. Before the guards could grab him, Moses lit out running with incredible speed, weaving in and out of secret passages until he escaped the palace. He kept running and running and barely stopped to catch his breath until he was clear out of the city, able to hide among the boulders in the desert. Oh no! What next? Would they find him? Would they kill him? How many legions of soldiers had Pharaoh sent out to capture him? Where could he run to? How would he be safe? He was a doomed man. But he did know one thing for sure. "I must get completely out of Egypt so they can never find me." He wandered for 400 miles. Here's a map of Egypt. Here's Egypt over here. And this red line is what he followed, 440 miles until he came to the land of Midian. He wandered for many days, almost dying of thirst and hunger. Finally, he came to an oasis. An oasis is a place in the desert where there's enough water to grow a few plants and trees, and often a pool or a well in the center. Moses cried out, "At last, a drink, and juicy dates from that palm tree, then a good sleep in the cool shade." Now, it happened that living nearby was a priest of the true God named Jethro. He was a descendant of Abraham's first son, Ishmael, and that is why he had the true gospel and also had been given the true priesthood of God. This priest, Jethro, had 7 daughters and no sons. So his daughters had to do all the work of raising sheep, shearing sheep, spinning the wool into yarn, and weaving cloth. Every day the girls took their flocks to the well, dipped leather baskets into the water, and pulled them out to fill a trough so their sheep could drink. But lots of other people used this well too, and very often big, rough men would scare away the sheep the girls had brought and let their own flocks drink the water the girls had pulled up. The girls could not fight the big men, so when this happened, the girls had to wait for the men to leave and then fill up the troughs again. It was very mean and not fair at all. If you think pulling up water from a well is easy, try this. Go up to your highest window and let down a rope. Tie the rope to a gallon of milk and then pull it up through the window. Then carry the gallon back down to the yard. Do that 100 times. It took the girls a long time to water their sheep, and you can bet those girls had strong arms after doing this all their lives. Now one day, as the mean men were pushing the girls out of the way and stealing their water, suddenly a very large man rushed out of the bushes. He had a long staff in his hands, and he beat off the men who were stealing the water. Then, with his greater strength, he refilled the water troughs. It was Moses. There weren't very many good-looking men in the area, especially men who acted regal and polite and spoke like noblemen. So all the girls were gaga over him. "Oh, thank you," they all cried. "Won't you please come home and meet our father?" said another. "Yes, I'm sure he would like to invite you for the evening meal." A few ran on ahead to tell Jethro, their father, what had happened. The name Jethro means friend of God. And that's exactly what this man was. The Spirit of the Lord was with Jethro. So after eating dinner together, Jethro knew he should invite Moses to live and work in his camp. "Oh, yes, Papa, please do. We can teach Moses how to be a shepherd." Moses spent lots of time with the girls and got to know each one of them very well. Soon, Jethro even urged Moses to choose one of his daughters for a wife. By this time, Moses was 40 years old, just a little younger than your dad, and he had learned to really like Jethro's oldest daughter, Zipporah. As well as being beautiful, she was grown up, smart, very wise and spiritual, not a giggling teenager like Jethro's younger girls. Moses chose Zipporah, and they were married. And after a few years, they had 2 baby boys. During all those years, Jethro taught Moses the true gospel of the real God. Moses learned that the idols in Egypt were not gods at all. They could certainly not answer prayers or guide people's lives. Moses loved the true gospel, but the more he learned, the more he really wished he could speak to God in person. During those same years, the old Pharaoh of Egypt died, and a new Pharaoh came to the throne. He was even more harsh to the Hebrew slaves than his father had been. The slaves wept and cried to God and begged for his help. God heard their cries and prayers and knew it was time to save them from their tormentors. Now, back in Midian, Moses was tending the sheep one day, far out in the wilderness near a mountain called Horeb. Way up high on the mountain, Moses saw a big bush burning with fire. He watched a while, but the bush didn't burn up. It just kept burning and burning. Curious, Moses left his sheep and climbed up in the mountain to see why the bush didn't burn up. As soon as he got to the bush, he heard a deep voice coming out of it. "Moses, Moses." Moses was pretty shocked at the voice, but answered, "Yes, I'm here." The deep voice said, "Don't come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place whereon you stand is holy ground." Amazed and fearful, Moses took off his sandals and fell to his knees. He knew it was the voice of the true God. God said, "Behold, I am the Lord God Almighty, and endless is my name. Thou, Moses, art my son, in the same form as my only begotten, who shall be the Savior." And then Moses saw God face to face and talked with him for hours, just like you would talk to another person. God showed Moses many astounding visions about the creation of the earth and all the people on it. You can read about all that Moses saw and learned in the book of Moses in the Pearl of Great Price. It's amazing. Then God said, "Behold, Moses, I have a work for you to do. I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt, crying out because of their slave drivers. So now I will send you to Egypt to bring out the Israelites and take them to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So go now, Moses, and do my will." Moses was shocked again. He had barely escaped from Egypt with his life, and now he was told by God to go back and get all the slaves released. Moses stammered, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God said, "I will be with you. Is there anything I cannot do?" Moses replied, "But how will the Israelites believe me? What if they ask me your name? What shall I tell them?" God said to Moses, "Tell them my name is I am who I am." That may sound like a strange name, but I am means I really exist. I really live. I have existed forever and will yet exist forever. And that is who God really is. Then God said, "Go tell this to the elders of Israel. Tell them I am has sent you. They will believe you, but Pharaoh will not believe you unless my mighty hand does miracles before him. After that, he will let my people go, and I will make the Egyptians give you silver and gold and clothing to take with you." Moses was still shaking with doubt. But Lord, what if they don't believe me?" God said, "Look at the staff in your hand. Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it, and the staff turned into a huge snake. Moses' eyes flew wide, and he ran. But the Lord said, "Stop. Come here. Take that snake by its tail." Moses was scared, but he did it. After all, you don't disobey the Lord when he's standing right in front of you. Moses grabbed the snake's tail, and it turned back into a staff. God said, "The Israelites will believe this. They will know you were sent by their God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Then the Lord said, "Put your hand inside your cloak." Moses did so, and when he took his hand out, it was white and bumpy, covered with rotting leprosy. Moses was horrified. In those days, if you had leprosy, you died of leprosy. There was no cure. But the Lord said, "Put your hand back and take it out again." Moses did so, and his hand was perfect once more. Boy, was he relieved. God said, "If they don't believe the first and second sign, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the ground. It will turn into blood." Moses was astonished that he would be allowed to do such miracles, but he was still afraid. Lord, I've never been a very good speaker. I'm afraid no one will believe me. Please send someone else." The Lord was angry that Moses kept trying to get out of the purpose for which God had sent him to earth. God said, "Then your brother Aaron can speak for you. He is a very good speaker, and he is already on his way here to meet you. But keep that staff in your hand so you can perform my miracles with it." Finally, Moses agreed, even though he was afraid. He said goodbye to Jethro, put his wife and 2 sons on a donkey, and took his long staff and enough supplies to last them for weeks, and walked back to Egypt, 400 miles. Come back again and find out about Moses and Pharaoh and curses.